Well, good morning. This is lesson number 13. Lesson 13. And lesson 13 is all about using order of operations. We've done some problems like this before. I think the best way to do it is I'm just going to do the practice problems with you to show you the deal. They can get very complicated looking. You have to look at them a certain way. So, for example, this is practice problem A on lesson 13. So you have 3, and that's called a brace, 2, a bracket, -4, -3, parenthesis, parenthesis, -8, -2, -4, and another brace. Okay, so first of all, note some things that every time you see a parenthesis going one way, look for the parenthesis going the other way. That means whatever's in between that, do that. Here, here. So we're going to basically, I was in Tiny Tots at karate the other day, and I thought, what would I do if all these little kids attacked me at the same time? And I would say, the answer is, I have to take them out one by one and move around a bit. So in other words, don't just think I'm going to start at the first one and work my way around. It's like, take out ones you can take out, then readjust, take out the rest of those. Eventually you'll end up with only one person less, and that's the answer. So here's what I mean by that. If I look at this and I say, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I know I can do this, and I know I can do that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to rewrite this problem. -4 minus 3 is going to become -7. And -8 minus 2 is a -10. -4 and a bracket and a brace. Then I say, all right, I took out those two. What's the next thing I know I can do? Well, I know I can do this. So that's going to be 70 minus 4. Okay, so that I could do. Well, what's 70 minus 4? That's the next thing I can do. Well, that's going to be 66. And 2 times 66 is going to be 132. And 3 times 132 is 396. So what I did is I just took them out bit by bit until I was done. There's no shortcut to this. I'm going to do this a little bit different, but the exact same problem. And let's see if this makes sense to you. Erase this part, and just going to attack it a little bit different. And go back to my pen. All right. So here I'm going to say, okay, 4 times 3, or 4 minus 3 is -7, -10, and that's going to be 70. 70 minus 4 is 66. Times 2 is 132. Times 3 is 396. Answer. There. If I was just doing it by myself, writing a minimal amount of work, I would just do exactly what I did before, but I'm keeping track of it all. That's kind of hard to do, just keeping track of those things like that. So typically, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to go ahead and write them out, especially until we get good at it. We're going to write out all the parts. Let me give you a little more complicated-ish one. 3 parentheses, bracket, parentheses, or brace, bracket, parentheses, -4 minus 1, 3, bracket, -5, brace, as a fraction, 2, 4 minus 7. So first, this is actually practice problem B on lesson 13. The key on this one is don't let the fraction mess you up. So I'm going to rewrite it as a fraction. I'm just going to do parts. Well, 4 minus 7 is -3, right? 2 times -3 is -6. So I can do it that way and just do it kind of in my head. -4 minus 1 is -5. -5 times 3 is -15. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. That's what's inside this. And then I have -5, and then a 3 here. Okay, so now negative 15 minus 5 is going to be negative 20. 3 times negative 20 is negative 60 over negative 6, which is equal to 10. And I'm done. So I could write this out in 5 different steps, take up the whole page, which is perfectly legit, or I can go ahead and just work on it and make notes on the problem. I'm okay with either. What eventually you will do is you'll do it similar to what I just did. You're not going to write it time and time again. Kind of the trick is to know when you need to write it and when you don't. The answer is when you could get confused, write it. If you're not confused, don't bother with it. Let me give you an example of one that you don't need to write. So negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 3. In this case, I'm not going to write this down. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 9 is 36. That would be all you would need to do. And so I've written enough that I can go and track it and see if I make mistakes. If you're like me, you make mistakes all the time when you do arithmetic, but you can kind of track when those mistakes are by just going backwards. And so whenever I take a test especially, I always double check everything, and I go forward starting here, then I go to the answer, and then I go backwards and I go, how did I get 36? Well, that was 4 times 9. How did I get 4? Oh, that was that. How did I get 9? That was that. And so I can go forward and backwards. That keeps me from making mistakes. And that is pretty much lesson 13, is practicing, and knowing that when you multiply negative numbers, you get a positive number or a negative number depending on how many there are. Okay, lesson 14. So lesson 14 is going to be a little bit different. Lesson 14, we're going to start jumping into some algebra this time. And lesson 14 is going to use this concept. You're going to see the word let, or you're going to see the word if. Both work fine. And you're going to see the word evaluate. So here's what I mean. Evaluate means figure out an answer. So figure out answer. So for example, I'm going to say x plus 2. Evaluate. In other words, figure out the answer. Well, there is no answer because x is x, 2 is 2, and there is no thing to evaluate. However, if I let x equal 9, or if I say if x equals 9, well, this would be 9 plus 2. The answer is 11. I can evaluate if somebody says this is what x is. That makes sense to you. That's really what you're looking at. Evaluate means figure out the answer if they tell you what the letters mean. There's no way to evaluate it if you don't. So, for example, this is the practice problem. I'll give you practice problem B on lesson 14. It says A minus AB minus A. And they say evaluate. Well, evaluate how? You don't know what A and B are. So, they say if A is equal to negative 4 and B is equal to negative 2. Well, now I can evaluate. I simply put negative 4 in for A's and negative 2 in for B's. And I evaluate. So, again, going back to the previous lesson, do what I can do first. Negative 4 times negative 2 is 8. Minus a minus 4 is plus 4. So this becomes negative 4 minus that thing. 8 plus 4 is 12. So negative 4 minus 12 is going to equal negative 16. And that's the answer. I've evaluated what this would be if A was this. If A was something else and B was something else, I would have a different number. That's the whole point of algebra, is that you create what's called a formula, and then you figure out, depending on what you're putting in, what the answer would be. That's how one evaluates. Okay, so let's do one more of this just to be clear. And this is letter D on the practice problem. So this one is negative XA, parentheses, A plus X, and they say evaluate this. Well, you can't. There are two letters. There's X and A. So in this one says if X is equal to negative 4 and A is equal to negative 2. So negative 4. Let's see if that shows up. So, well, X is negative 4. This becomes sorry. Yeah, that works it. Done. So negative 4. I'm going to go ahead and put in parentheses. X is negative 4. And A is equal to negative 2. Parenthesis. A is negative 2 plus negative 4 plus negative 4. Now notice in here, there's a couple ways you can do it. In this back half, I put the negatives up high, and in front half, I put them in parentheses. You can do it either way. I'll go ahead and finish solving this one. Negative 2 plus negative 4 is negative 6. And so I'm going to end up with a negative, negative, negative. So it's going to be, what's 4 times 2 is 8. So it's going to be negative 8 times negative 6 plus a negative 4. So negative 8 times 6 is 48. Negative times negative is a positive. And the answer is 44. And so that's how you do this one. Again, you're just saying, what is X? What is A? Put them in. If they were different numbers, you would get a different answer. That's what algebra is all about, is a formula with a different answer. One more last time, just to make it clear, this is letter C. This is X minus AB, A minus B. And that's if X is equal to 3 and A is equal to negative 2 and B is equal to negative 4. So I'm going to do this one using how I would normally write this time. This is negative 3 minus A, which is negative 2, times B, which is negative 4, times A, which is negative 2, minus B, which is negative 4. So I would do it this way because I can track what's positive, what's negative. Negative 2 minus a minus 4 is negative 2 plus 4, which means that's 2. And negative 2 is a positive 2 times negative 4. And then negative 3 plus that whole thing. And so this is going to be 2 times 4 is 8, times 2 is 16, so it's minus 16. And then negative 3, answer is negative 19. So you're going to have to take some practice and check the answers in the back of the book to make sure you're doing it right, or you will be in trouble because you'll develop habits and you won't know where they are. Okay, last lesson of the day is lesson number 15. Lesson number 15 is about shapes. Specifically, it's about volumes. That means how much stuff is in this giant thingy. All right, so what I mean by that is, let's say I have a cube of some sort. And this is 3 long, 4 long, 2 high. And I say, what's the volume? The volume is equal to length times width times height. So in this case, it would be 3 times 4 times 2, which is 12 times 2, which is 24. And if this was inches, the answer would be cubic inches, because you're multiplying 3 things That's what we call volume is always in cubic something. Cubic centimeters, cubic inches, cubic yards, cubic gallons. Not cubic gallons. Cubic centimeters. That's how we do volume of a rectangle. What's called a rectangular prism. Prism means it's just a rectangle, but it's got height to it. And so if you were to take, for example, a triangle and you gave it height, that would be called a triangular prism. If you take a circle and you give it height, it's called a cylinder. Cylinder versus a triangular prism, P-R-I-S-M. Okay, and then there's just odd-shaped ones, which you don't really care about, but they're there. Okay, so here's the deal. How do you find the volume? Well, here's the deal. If you know what the top is, and you know how tall it is, what you do is you find the area of the top times the height. So I just did that. So let's say this was, again, 3 times 4, and that's too high. 3 times 4, that's 12, times the height, which is 24, so it gives me 24 square cubic inches. That's the one I just did. What if I have a triangle like this? And I know this one is, let's say it's 6, 8, and it's 12 deep. How do I find that one? Well, I need to, this one is kind of lying on its side. I'm going to say I have a triangle. That's the top times the height. So what's the area of a triangle? Well, the area of a triangle is going to equal the base times the height and half of it, because it's not a rectangle, it's half a rectangle. So that's going to be 8 times 6 is 48, and 48 divided by 2 is 24. So it's going to be, this area inside here is 24 times the height. Well, what's 24 times 12? 2 times 24 is 48, plus 240 is going to give me 288. And if it's inches, it's cubic inches. So it's the area of the top times the height. So you have to know how to find the area of a triangle to be able to do this one, obviously. And so let's look at one more that you'll have to do and some practice on it. And that is, what if you have something that's funky shaped? So let's say you've got a triangle that you know is, let's say, 8, and this is connected to a half circle of which the radius is 3. And they say this whole thing is part of a big old box thing. It's not a rectangle, it's not a triangle, it's really kind of a triangle, and this is 90 degrees here. And what do? Well, find the area of the top is what you do. What's the area of the triangle? 8. So let's find the top. Top is going to be the area of the triangle plus that area of the half circle. Well, the area of the triangle is 8 times, well, if this is 3 and this is 3, that's 6. So 8 times 6 divided by 2. So that's the triangle. Base times height divided, base times height divided by 2. Okay, so that's going to be 48 divided by 2, or 24. The area of the half circle, well, we know that the area of a circle is pi r squared. Well, this is half a circle, so that we know it's going to be pi r squared divided by 2. So in this case, it's pi times 3 squared, which is 9. 2. Your book will usually give you the answer as 9/2 pi. You can multiply it out and get a real number, which is what I would typically do. 3.14 times 9, and I'm getting 9 times 4 is 36. And I'd use a calculator for this. 1 times 9 is 9, plus 2 is 2, and then 3 times 9 is 27, plus 1 is 28, and so 28.26. Half of that is going to be 14.13. So the answer is going to be 38.13 is going to be the area of the top. Well, how high is this? I don't know, let's say it was 10 high. And if it was 10 high, then it would be 381.3, cubic inches or so. So, again, area of the top times height. Sometimes the area of the top is more work. Sometimes it's real easy. That's lesson number 15. And that's all we're going to do. So hope you have a great weekend. See you later. Bye.